Welcome to GPS, another unusual session of GPS. And here are the five of us in our basements, in our kitchens, in our bedrooms, and other unusual places to tape a television show. This is God's Prophetic Surprises. If you haven't seen it in this format before, we're all here. We're still together. God's Word is in front of us. And God has been really good during this special time when all of us are unable to be in the studio, but we've been able with this modality to continue taping our programs, continue our journey through the book of Revelation. I'm Jon Paulien, and I am professor of religion, New Testament interpretation at Loma Linda University. And we have also with us Guilherme.
Yes.
And just introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm a PhD student at Andrews University, focusing on New Testament and the book of Revelation.
Awesome. And we're so glad that you can be with us with that new knowledge and expertise. And Viana.
Hi, I'm Viana Chambers, and I am the children's pastor at the Calamasa Church and a seminary student at La Sierra University.
Awesome. And then Shifra.
I am Shifra Fipliai, and I currently serve as associate pastor at Campus Hill Church.
And then we have Philip, the only one who could pronounce his last name.
My name is Philip Milosavljevic, and it is a very complicated name from Eastern Europe, but we make work with it. And I'm a young adult pastor at the Loma Linda University Church.
Awesome. Well, I was just wondering, and perhaps I'll direct this one to Shifra, but how did you first get interested in the book of Revelation? What was the context?
The context was my freshman year in college. I was 18 years of age, and there was a GYC session somewhere, I think in Nashville or somewhere in Tennessee. And
for the sake of our audience, what is GYC?
Correct. You're right. It's a gathering that I went to in the United States of America, usually one of the states, for young people in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I don't know how else to describe it.
So it's a big conference, and what happened there?
They had different breakout groups with different topics from the Bible, one of which was Revelation, and taught by someone's name that I recognized, Mark Finley. So I thought I'd give it like a chance out of, as the young people say, hype. Just out of hype, like, let me go check out what Revelation is all about. People make a big deal about it. There's a lot of hype. So I sat in the front row, not expecting to really understand the book of Revelation at 18 years of age. And I left not only understanding what I had heard, but feeling greatly moved and blessed to hear the gospel in this seemingly daunting and intimidating book of the Bible. So that's how I first became in awe and intrigued by the book.
And that's why we hold conferences, isn't it? Because you don't really know the impact often. It only comes out later on, but you never know what word, what single sermon, what encounter with another person may be very formative in a person's life. So glad for that, and glad that means you can be with us and contributing as you have through the last couple of years. Appreciate that very much. Viana, I was just thinking if you would take your Bible and go with us to Revelation 12 and read verses 7 through 9. We talked about them in the last program, but there's one or two issues I'd still like to explore.
Okay, I am reading from the NRSV. And war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. The dragon and his angels fought back, but they were defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. The great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him.
All right, so you have this concept that Satan and his angels are in heaven. And there was a point in history when they were at home there. when Satan was called Lucifer, and he was one of the covering cherubs, and all of his angels were partners with all the angels that had not in any way questioned God. And but then came a time of separation, and the question I want you to address is: do you think that Satan was cast out from heaven violently, or did he and his angels just leave? What do you think?
You know, it's interesting. The name Satan, Diabolos, literally means the slanderer.
Mhm.
You know, so within his name, you almost get this picture of potentially how he was kicked out or why he was named that in the first place. You know, and I don't see it being a war of knives and swords and rockets. I mean, what kind of weapons would they use in heaven? I don't even know. I mean, it's
That's a good point.
so it more so portrays this notion of a battle via word, the mind, like a big person's battle, you know, as opposed to a little kid in the playground wrestling in the dirt. You know, there's God and Satan, and they're fighting, and you know that.
Well, it could be lightsabers, right? You know, I mean, that's the vision I think that our generation has. You know, Star Wars and this concept of cosmic conflict. So, what was your answer to the question? Do you think that it was a voluntary leaving, or was it a forceful dismissal?
I mean, that almost, you know, you and Guillermo have this New Testament expertise. You might see a nuance in a word there, but I'm not seeing anything. So I don't know if I can dabble in that, but I imagine it was, hey, you know, like a teenager battling with a parent, kind of a fight. Get out of the house, you know. What did you do? I can't, you know. And they kind of put
Interesting.
their head down and walk out, you know. That's kind of what I almost see. And if need be, you know, one of the bigger brothers might have grabbed that kind of rebellious one and kind of said, hey, get out, you know, you're not allowed to be here anymore. But I don't know how you guys see the word cast down in its, you know, Greek form.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else?
Well, I was going to say, one of the ways that I see it working in children's ministry, we use this tool so much that it's the first thing that came to mind when you were speaking, Philip, and that's like the idea of this magnet and the repelling forces when you try to put these ends together that cannot meet. And so sometimes you'll see this like magnet trying to come, but it's not quite there, and it just bounces back very violently. And I wonder if there is a sense of there was no place for them in heaven. There was no place for that kind of evil and deceiving, right, and slander in the presence of God and so much goodness that it was like this jerking back to a place where he could be, which was here on earth.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Do you hear me?
When I look at the text, this is what I see. So there's this war. So it's interesting, right? Because it says there's this war in heaven, and Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. And then the dragon and his angels fought back. So the first evidence I have here is of resistance. The devil and his side, they resist. Whether this was some sort of spiritual force or words, there's resistance, right? So the dragon and his side are resisting. And number two, then it says they did not prevail or they were not strong. So they're resisting and they fail in that attempt. So one, there's resistance. Second, they fail in their attempt to resist. And then third, nor was a place found for them any longer in heaven. So now they have no right to be there anymore. So that's number three. And then four, and the great dragon was thrown down. Now, in Greek, this was thrown down is eblethe. and which comes from balo, which one of the meanings of this word is to throw or to cast out, right? To drive out, right? To drive away, and to cast away. And so and there's also the fact that this verb is in the passive. So Satan here, the dragon, is the object of a verb in the, I mean, he's the subject of the verb, but the verb is in the passive. So he's the object of the action, right? So it's something that was done to him. So, the interesting thing is that sometimes in the Greek, we cannot tell whether it is a middle or a passive, which means whether someone did something on them or for their sake, or whether someone else did it on them. But actually, in the aorist, in the past tense here, that can be clear because you have different forms for the middle and the passive. So the form here would be, at least in my understanding, very clearly the passive. So there should not be any option of this being middle, and I could be corrected. But that's my understanding of the Greek, that there's no way this is a middle verb, so it's passive. If this is the case, that's a fourth evidence, which is that something was done to Satan. He was cast out. He was thrown out, which is what we see in the English translation. But just to make sure that sometimes we wonder, well, how is it in the Greek, right? So the Greek makes it so it was something that was done to him. So I think putting all those evidences together, however that was, I think to say that it was voluntary, I think it would be difficult. Because think about it. You try to resist, you fail, you have no right to be there anymore, and now you are moved out, right? So whether that was used some sort of spiritual force or it was just the force of authority, of a word of authority, the understanding that I have looking at these evidences that he had no choice. He was not a voluntary thing. Like if it said, and Satan went out, then I think that's how I see it.
Let me counter a little bit, but also agree. I am by no means the Revelation PhD scholar. However, I love the linguistics.
You're a woman. That makes up a lot, doesn't it?
Be honest, here are two of us support me on the journey. Okay, so I see the answer as both. I see it being yes, and yes, they were expelled, and yes, it was voluntary. I think for the generation that thinks in very relational terms, this kind of language from first glance seems like a Game of Thrones, definitely not the TV series, but it feels like a Game of Thrones for sure. And it doesn't specify in the text, at least as far as I can see, what exactly they were fighting over at least in this verse. War broke out in heaven, and the angels fought the dragon with the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought. But it is in the context, and I've learned in GPS to always take a look at what precedes to see what frames the following verses. So the woman, the child, and the dragon is probably a big reason why there's fighting. Is probably a big reason that's connected to what is like a flashback, right? Am I right? This verse 7 is a flashback. It's not events in subsequent order, right? There was the woman, the child, and the dragon scene that finishes in verse 6, and then there's a flashback in verse 7, kind of almost giving like some kind of context, which I won't pretend to have answers for. But my reason for saying that I think it's both is because relationally, when you choose your direction, whether as a teenager, a child, or the big adult game of resistance, when you choose your path and you choose a path that resists God, that resists the kingdom of heaven, then that's your voluntary choice. I think, yes, he had free will. It was voluntary. That was his path of resistance that he chose. But in terms of, was there this, like verse 8 says, not only did they not prevail, but there was also no place found for them in heaven any longer. And that's relationally saddening to me, almost as if God, this God who is love, was looking for ways to redeem, was looking for ways for the one who he created, Lucifer, to still be able to get him back, this beautiful angel of light. But there's no place. He was looking, and he exhausted all his options relationally, voluntarily.
Very, very, very interesting. I was looking at that too, and was almost thinking, no place was. It's almost like they're saying, hey guys, is there some place we can hide out in the corner? We can still be part of all this, but not trouble you anymore, and so on. And I hadn't thought of it in terms of maybe God looking for a place. I was thinking more of Satan saying, well, we got to be able to work this out somehow. Leaving is such a drastic thing. But there's another piece here, very interesting, just to stir the pot. And by the way, using youthful language, I guess the question could be termed, were God and Satan breaking up or breaking off? There seems to be a difference, at least as I listen to the young people, a difference between breaking up and breaking off. Breaking up is nasty, when one person imposes their will on another. Breaking off is where the two agree. We're just not right for each other. Let's, you go your way, I go my way. Were they breaking up or breaking off? Now, there's one little piece here that we haven't come to yet, but needs to come down, and that's verse 12. In verse 12, it says, "Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has gone down to you." That's active now. See? The devil has come down. It doesn't say he was thrown down. It doesn't say he was dumped on you. It says he came down to you, and he's filled with fury because he knows his time is short. So there's a little ambiguity, and so maybe I'm kind of liking, Shifra, your idea that of maybe answering yes. That on the one hand, Satan did not have permission to stay. On the other hand, perhaps, recognizing that he withdrew, he and his angels withdrew, rather than test God's overwhelming power. Philip?
I am wondering what you might say to the question, why did he have to come down when he did?
Well, it says there's a war, and the question is, what kind of war is that? And I think we've hinted at that, but we haven't really gotten to the verses that clarify that yet.
Okay.
So maybe we'll have to leave this just a little bit suspended.
All right.
Yeah, and move forward just a little bit. What kind of war is this? Now, one of you said something like, I don't see it as a sword fight or a knife fight or lightsabers or anything like that. It seems to be of a different nature, and I think we'll get more clarity on that as we go forward. Let's read verse 10, and perhaps Philip, I could get you to read that for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Chapter 12, verse 10.
Okay. "And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, 'Now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brethren has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God.'"
Okay. And read verse 11 also.
"And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, for they loved not their lives unto death."
Now, here's the interesting thing. It was suggested, is this a flashback? But I have a bit of a challenge with that, because here in 10 and 11, what is in the past? It says, now has come the kingdom. Now he's been cast out. All right. And then in verse 11, the cross is past tense. They overcame already, past tense, by the blood of the Lamb. Verse 10, the whole piece of the kingdom of Christ. That sounds a lot like chapter 5. When Jesus was installed on the throne, I think we drew the conclusion then, some of you were not with us at that point in the program, but we drew the conclusion then that most likely the enthronement of Jesus is at his ascension, when he ascended to heaven. Where's the ascension in chapter 12? It's in verse 5.
Yeah.
When the child is snatched up to his throne. So you have ascension language in verse 5. You have cross language in verse 11. Is everything in between some distant past, or is it has something to do with what is actually going on there? So flashback is a way that these are often read, but is that what is actually happening here? Go ahead, Shifra.
Just whoa.
Whoa.
That's all I
Okay.
have.
Well,
Yeah.
is that then telling us or pointing to when this throwing down occurred? Are these the scenes surrounding that time when that actually happened? So he wasn't thrown down before the creation of the earth, before Adam and Eve came, necessarily, because the book of Job says that there was this kind of channel of sorts where he could go up and down almost, right? He could go down, talk with the humans, then go back up and talk with God. Like, hey, did you see what just happened down there? Did you see Job? Let me go back down there. I'm going to come back up. I'll give you a report of what I did, and he goes back up. So there's this openness, but then what you're bringing up here, could it have been something around the cross that required now a full banishment, if you would say? Now, as a result of this, no longer are you allowed to be up here because we all see what you just did.
There is a casting down before the cross, before the birth of Christ. That's in verse 4, where the dragon drags a third of the stars of heaven down to earth with him.
Right.
So that is clearly a reference. There is a casting down that's well before. But here's the interesting context. If Satan was cast down at the beginning of time, what is he doing up in heaven in Job? And so Sigve Tonstad, who has been on this program a number of times, was one of the founders back in the beginning. He likes to talk about there to be two castings down. And actually in an academy textbook, that's for high school students that I wrote about 20 years ago on Revelation, I had two castings down. A casting down physically, where Satan and his angels physically left heaven, but Satan still had a visitor's visa because the issues in heaven were not resolved. There were angels in heaven that were loyal to God, but had their doubts. And it seems that the cross ultimately settled a number of things.
Yeah.
It settled things about the character of God, his nonviolence there at the cross. And so if you think of a nonviolent casting down, that kind of fits other parts of Revelation. On the other hand, some parts of Revelation do sound pretty violent. So this question we've been wrestling with is an open one. Going back to verse, go ahead.
Could I read I'm now finding this one comment here. This comes from Ellen White, who in the Adventist denomination has held some commentary prowess on many things, and she writes this one thing. I wonder what you would say about this. It kind of goes along with what you just said. The casting down of Satan as an accuser of the brethren in heaven was accomplished by the work of Christ in giving up his life.
So he was cast out physically, but he was still allowed to accuse.
Yeah.
And now he's no longer allowed to accuse.
Yeah.
Or is it simply nobody's listening anymore?
I think so, because now I'm really liking Philip's teenage scenario there, imagery for anyone who needs that help, that visual help. I'm thinking of like a young adult who gets into a fight, huge fight, very divisive in the family, and then moves out, right? But still has a key, and also has lingering sympathies of the rest of the household. But very clear that the head of the household and this, young adult moving out, they're on bad terms. And then at the cross, everyone in the house votes like, yeah, no, we totally have seen enough now. No keys, change the locks, and don't come back.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I would just kind of also add is like just one thing, like, because we're bringing these analogies of human relationships and teenagers and family. I just want to distance myself from that a little bit with this comment.
Do tell.
We have to just remember that if this took place after the cross, as seems to be a viable interpretation, then this is the dragon that just wanted to kill the child. And then he goes, and then there's a fight, whether, even if it's a fight of words. And so I really have a hard time to see that the devil, whose character is characterized by pride, would say, okay, I'll leave. And so, sure, God is a very loving God, but I don't think Satan would voluntarily leave just because he just wanted to devour the Son of God, right? And so he fights. It's just like, at the end of the day, just think about this. If you lose everything, for example, if you play the finals in the NBA and you lose the playoffs, is it voluntary to walk away without the trophy? There's no option, so that's what I'm saying. Like, no one has to kick you out necessarily, right? But there's no way someone is getting that trophy but the team that won, right? So it's like it's no option because it's a defeat. There was but there's one thing too. Satan is not there seeking reconciliation either.
Liana, you were going to say something. It needs to be pretty brief.
No, please finish, Guillermo. Yeah. Fascinating.
He wants the throne. That's what he wants.
Well, analogies are analogies, and that's what we are working with here. No question about it. But I'm intrigued with both. But I personally really drawn to Shifra's analogy here because clearly you're dealing with relational issues. If this is not a battle of swords and F-15s and battle tanks and all that kind of stuff, then it's a different kind of battle. And in our next program, we want to address that question. What kind of war is this? Because if it is more of a family dispute, then how we read a lot of these things is different. And maybe how we read the whole book of Revelation will be different. And just maybe that's God's prophetic surprise for this program, that this battle in heaven may be just a little different than we'd imagined. We'll see you again next week on GPS.